The wind from Lake Michigan blew violently into Chicago's avenues like invisible shards of ice, cutting through the thick coats of the hurried commuters. It was a typical gloomy Tuesday morning in this city, where the sky seemed cast in reinforced concrete, weighing heavily upon the skyscrapers. In the main lobby of Sterling Towers, the city's most glamorous and cold financial sanctum, men and women in bespoke suits glided by with serious expressions. They stared at their phone screens, checking the Dow Jones Index, muttering about mergers and quarterly earnings. No one looked at anyone else. No one smiled. Except for Leo Mancini. The automatic revolving doors opened, and Leo stepped in as if he were walking onto a Broadway stage, not arriving for his minimum wage custodial shift. "Good morning, Big Mike," Leo yelled, high-fiving the yawning old security guard. "Black coffee, 2 sugars, no cream, just the way you like it. I told the kid at Dunkin' Donuts that if they got it wrong, I'd come over and sing opera until they fixed it." Mike chuckled, a rare smile for the day, accepting the steaming cup. "How do you always have this much energy, Leo? It's below freezing out there." "Cold? Mike, this is fresh Chicago air. It wakes us up so we can earn money to pay off the debts of life," Leo winked, pulling up the cuff of his gray uniform pants slightly to reveal dazzling lime green socks patterned with pineapples wearing sunglasses. "What do you think? My lucky Tuesday socks." Leo swiped his card, pushing his cleaning cart toward the service elevator. He hummed the tune of My Girl by The Temptations, his head bobbing to the rhythm. In the eyes of the passing office workers, Leo was a harmless fool, a cheap clown bringing lightheartedness to the serious workplace. Some rolled their eyes in annoyance, others offered a patronizing smile. But none of them saw Leo's hand tremble slightly as he stuffed the pink slip back into his rear pocket. It was the second overdue notice from the electric company. None of them knew that the radiant smile on Leo's face was an elaborately constructed trench to hold back the tidal wave of panic threatening to swallow him whole. In the elevator, alone with his reflection in the metallic mirror, Leo let out a long breath, his shoulders slumping for exactly 3 seconds. Sophie's Ventolin inhaler is only good for 2 more days. Paycheck comes Friday. If I ask for an advance... He closed his eyes, picturing his 7-year-old daughter's face. Sophie, with her curly hair and big eyes, curled up under the blankets because her asthma worsened with the winter chill. Sophie was his world, the only reason he could put on this joyful mask every day. 1, 2, 3. Showtime, Leo whispered. He opened his eyes, the smile returning, bright and perfect. The elevator doors opened onto the 45th floor, the executive suite. On the other side of the long carpeted corridor, Elena Sterling stood looking down at the city from her floor-to-ceiling glass window. If Leo was fire, Elena was ice. At 38, she was the youngest CEO in the history of Sterling Holdings. She wore a perfectly tailored navy sheath dress, her platinum blonde hair neatly pinned up without a single stray strand. Elena had no concept of lucky Tuesdays or pineapple socks. Her life was a series of optimization algorithms, where emotion was considered an interfering variable to be eliminated. "Bradford, where is the risk assessment report?" Her voice was cold and sharp. She didn't need to turn around. Bradford, the CFO, a middle-aged man with an oily face and transparent ambition, hurriedly placed a folder on the marble table. "Miss Sterling, shareholders are concerned about the financial health post-merger. They want to see decisiveness in today's meeting." "They will see it." Elena turned, her gray-blue eyes unreadable. "I didn't build this empire to listen to complaints of the faint-hearted." She walked towards the conference room. A faint, sharp pain in her left shoulder briefly made her pause, but Elena dismissed it. Just stress, she told herself. Too much caffeine and too little sleep. She was accustomed to ignoring her body in service of her brain. When Elena entered the room, the air seemed to be sucked out. 12 executives sat around the long oak table, silent as statues. They feared her, respected her, and a few of them, like Bradford, were subtly waiting for her to stumble.
Outside in the hallway, Leo was wiping fingerprints from the glass doors. He heard Elena's crisp voice through the slightly ajar door, talking about cost-cutting and personnel restructuring. Leo sighed, spraying glass cleaner onto the mirror's surface. Cost-cutting, he mumbled, means cutting people like me. He moved to mop the floor, whistling Ain't No Mountain High Enough to drown out the tension radiating from the powerful room. He tried to focus on his work, on the goal of earning enough money for Sophie's new inhaler, but fate had a different plan for this morning. Inside the meeting room, Elena stood at the head of the table, pointing at a revenue chart. "We cannot accept this stagnation. I want to—" Her words were cut short by a choked gasp.
The pain was no longer a gentle knock. It was a brutal, aggressive kick to the chest. It felt like a giant, invisible hand was crushing her heart. Blood stopped pumping to her brain. Elena's vision blurred, the faces around her distorting into messy streaks of color. She raised a hand to her chest, fingers clutching the expensive fabric. "Miss Sterling?" someone asked, the voice sounding distant, as if underwater. Elena's knees buckled. She fell, a heavy, free-fall impact onto the thick carpet. Silence reigned in the room for exactly 3 seconds. Then came the chaos. "She fainted! Call 911. Don't touch her. What if we get sued? Someone call security." The 12 most powerful people in the building, controllers of billions of dollars, were frozen. They panicked. Bradford retreated to the wall, his hand trembling as he held his phone, but unable to dial. The fear of legal liability, the fear of violating protocol, and sheer instinctual cowardice paralyzed them. They watched the most powerful woman lie motionless, her complexion slowly turning from ashen to purple. The conference room door burst open. Leo Mancini rushed in. He had heard the loud thud and the terrifying silence that followed. His cleaning cart was abandoned in the hallway, askew. The scene before him was ludicrous and tragic. A woman dying on the floor, and a group of men in suits staring as if observing an abstract, incomprehensible piece of art. "Get out of the way, now!" Leo yelled, the volume and authority in his voice startling the executives into moving aside. Leo slid onto the floor next to Elena. He saw a person fading away. "Hey, boss, no time for a nap now," Leo said loudly, his voice still holding its strange optimism, but his hands swiftly checking her carotid pulse. No pulse, no chest rise. "Cardiac arrest! Damn it!" Leo roared. "Call 911. Someone run out to the hall and get the AED immediately. Go!" Bradford stammered. Who are you? You're not authorized to—" "I said go get that damn machine." Leo turned, his eyes blazing, scorching the executive's cowardice. Bradford flinched and scurried out. Leo turned back to Elena. He interlocked his hands, placed the heel of his palm in the center of her chest, and locked his elbows. He recalled the free first aid class at the Southside Community Center he attended only because they handed out free sandwiches afterward. What did the instructor say? Rhythm. Rhythm was the most important thing. 100 to 120 beats per minute. Which song? Ah, right. Bee Gees, Stayin' Alive. Aha, ha ha, stayin' alive, stayin' alive. Leo began humming aloud, not as a joke, but to keep the pace. He put his entire body weight into it. Press deep, release. Press deep, release. Sweat began to bead on his forehead. Elena's ribs audibly cracked under the pressure. A few people in the room gasped in horror. "You're breaking her bones!" a female executive screamed. "Your broken bones are better than dead," Leo retorted, never stopping. He looked down at Elena's blue-tinged face. "Come on, Elena. You can't let these boring suits win. Wake up. I bet you've never lost a business deal. Don't lose this one." 1 minute passed. 2 minutes. Time seemed to stretch infinitely. Leo's muscles began to scream from fatigue, but he didn't stop. He thought of Sophie. Every time she had an asthma attack, he felt this same helplessness, only knowing how to pray and wait for breath to return. He channeled that fear into strength. "Come on, stay alive."
Bradford returned with the AED machine. Leo snatched it, tearing open Elena's shirt without hesitation, an act that elicited horrified gasps from the room for the disrespect. He attached the pads. "Clear!" he shouted. The electric shock hit. Elena's body jerked up from the floor. "Still no pulse. Keep compressing." Leo plunged back in. 1, 2, 3, 4. "Wake up. My Sophie is waiting for me to come home and tell her a story. You can't make me late." Leo's voice cracked, mixed with sweat and desperation. And then, a miracle, or science, happened. Elena's body convulsed violently. She drew a deep, rattling breath, a sound rough like tearing cloth, but the most beautiful sound in the world right now. Her lungs sucked in air. Her eyelids fluttered. Leo stopped, panting. He sat back on his heels, sweat streaming down his neck, soaking his uniform collar.
Elena opened her eyes. The first image to register in her retina was not the expensive plaster ceiling, nor the faces of her colleagues. She saw a face drenched in sweat, warm brown eyes filled with concern, and peeking out below, a pair of yellow pineapple socks. "Welcome back, boss," Leo smiled, a shaky but heartbreakingly genuine smile. "Your hair is a bit messy, but you still look great." The paramedics burst into the room like a storm, pushing Leo aside. He retreated, fading into the shadow of the corner, returning to his invisible place, allowing the clean, uniformed medical experts to take over. As the stretcher carrying Elena disappeared, the room let out a collective sigh of relief. But that relief quickly turned to shame. The powerful men realized how useless they had been, and to cover that shame, they needed a scapegoat. Bradford, who had just recovered, walked up to Leo. Leo was standing there, hands trembling as he wiped the sweat from his forehead with a paper towel. "Well done," Bradford said, but his voice was frigid, devoid of any warmth or gratitude. "Just doing what needed to be done," Leo smiled, about to stretch his aching back. "I think she'll be fine." "You're fired," Bradford interrupted. The smile froze on Leo's face. "Excuse me? What did you say?" "You are terminated, effective immediately." Bradford adjusted his tie, regaining his usual condescending air. "You severely violated workplace safety protocols. You have no medical certification. You ripped the CEO's clothing and engaged in inappropriate physical contact. Do you know the legal risk the company faces if she sustains broken ribs or internal injury due to your random compressions?" I saved her life," Leo stammered, feeling a punch to the gut harder than before. "If I hadn't, she'd be dead." "That is a doctor's job, not a janitor's," Bradford said, looking down at Leo's yellow socks with disgust. "We will mail your weekly paycheck. Gather your belongings and leave the building within 15 minutes. Otherwise, I will call security for forcible removal." Leo stood dumbfounded. Around him, the other executives turned away, pretending to check their phones or whispering amongst themselves. Not a single person stood up to defend him. Not one person said, "But he just saved her life." Their silence was more cruel than Bradford's words. Leo looked down at his hands. These hands that had just snatched life back from death, now deemed dirty and full of risk. He nodded, slowly. "All right," Leo said, his voice soft. He looked up, the smile returning to his lips, but this time it was twisted and painful like a scar. "I was planning to quit anyway. The air in here is a little low on oxygen." He turned and walked away, back straight, head held high, but with every step away from the conference room, his world crumbled a little more. Job loss, loss of health insurance, Sophie's medicine, rent, it all hit him like a tsunami. 15 minutes later, Leo walked out of the Sterling Tower's revolving door. In his hand was a small cardboard box, containing only a picture of Sophie, a bottle of water, and a pair of spare rubber gloves. Big Mike was still standing there. "Leaving early, Leo? No overtime today?" Leo paused. The cold Chicago wind lashed his face, stinging. He took a deep breath, fighting back the tears welling up. He turned to Mike, offering the brightest smile he could muster from the fragments of his soul. "Ah, Mike," Leo said, his voice almost cheerful, "I just decided to promote myself to freelance customer.
Life is an adventure, right? You're the craziest, happy guy I've ever met, Mike laughed, shaking his head. Leo waved goodbye and walked away, blending into the gray stream of people on the street. He was still smiling, but as he turned his back on the ivory tower, his shoulders shook violently. The smile remained plastered on his face like flawed makeup, while tears began to roll down, hot and salty, onto his cheeks. He was a hero for a moment, but now he was back to being an unemployed father, drowning in the heart of prosperous and cruel America. The rickety CTA bus pulled away from the glittering Loop Center, leaving behind the glass and steel skyscrapers reflecting the brilliant sunset. As the bus crossed the invisible boundary dividing the city, the scenery changed rapidly. High-end fashion boutiques gave way to barred pawn shops, dive bars, and rows of peeling brownstones. Leo sat in the back, his head leaning against the rattling window. On his lap was the small cardboard box, the sole legacy of 3 years of dedicated work. He was no longer smiling. There was no one here he needed to perform for. The cheerful mask slipped, revealing a face haggard and much older than his 32 years. The yellow streetlights swept across his face in intermittent pulses, like counting down the seconds until he had to face reality.
He got off the bus in the south side. The wind here felt colder, carrying the smell of mildew and coal smoke. Leo pulled his collar up high, walking quickly through the dark alleys, where the familiar wail of police sirens echoed as background music. As he climbed the stairs leading to the 4th floor of the old apartment complex, he saw it. A glaring orange sheet of paper taped to the door of apartment 4B. Eviction notice, 72-hour deadline. Leo froze. He gripped the cardboard box so tightly his knuckles turned white. He knew this day would come, but he never expected it to arrive the very day he lost his only income source. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, trying to swallow the bitter lump in his throat. 1, 2, 3. Showtime, he whispered, his familiar mantra. He tore off the notice, crumpled it, and shoved it deep into his pocket. He opened the door, and instantly the smile, his weapon and shield, returned to his lips. "Daddy's home! Where is Queen Sophie?" Leo called out, his voice loud, warm, and energetic, completely contrasting with the storm raging inside him. A 7-year-old girl with curly brown hair and big eyes ran out of the bedroom, hugging a well-loved teddy bear missing one eye. "Dad!" Sophie cheered, but the cheer was quickly cut short by a fit of dry coughing. The sound was like needles piercing Leo's heart. Her lungs were reacting to the cold seeping through the cracked window pane. Leo rushed over, lifting his daughter and twirling her, intentionally turning the action of checking her forehead into a game. "Was the princess good today? I brought a special gift from the Glass Kingdom." He put the cardboard box on the table, taking out the blue rubber gloves. Hulk gloves! Strictly prohibited for nose-picking, though. Sophie giggled, her breath still wheezing slightly. "Why are you home so early? Mike said you usually work overtime." "Ah!" Leo blinked, not showing a hint of hesitation. "I got a promotion. Now I'm a freelance expert. That means I can spend more time making my famous grilled cheese sandwich for you." Dinner took place under the flickering kitchen light. Leo toasted the last 2 slices of bread with cheap cheese, cutting it into a star shape. As he ate, he told Sophie about the imaginary battle of Sir Leo and the dust dragon in the Sterling Tower. He told the story animatedly, dancing and gesturing, turning the hardships of his janitorial work into an epic adventure. Sophie laughed heartily, forgetting her shortness of breath, forgetting the cold of the room. But every performance must end. Late at night, after finishing the last chapter of an old comic book and making sure Sophie was asleep with a steady, though slightly labored rhythm, Leo gently closed the bedroom door. He walked into the kitchen. The apartment was plunged into darkness and silence, save for the irritating hum of the old refrigerator. Leo went to the wall cabinet where the medicine was kept. He took Sophie's Ventolin inhaler. He shook it lightly. Empty. Only the dry rattle of plastic shells hitting each other. That small sound was the final straw. It was more terrifying than Bradford's shouting, more terrifying than the orange eviction notice.
Without insurance, a new inhaler cost nearly $50. Leo currently had exactly $12 and some change in his wallet. Leo slid down onto the cold kitchen floor. He sat with his knees pulled up to his chest, leaning against the refrigerator. The positivity vanished. The smile went out like a cut light bulb. He buried his head in his knees, and his body began to shake, not from cold, but from the most primal human fear. He was afraid he had failed. He was afraid he couldn't protect the only thing that mattered in his life. "I'm sorry, Sophie. Daddy's so sorry," he whispered into the darkness, his voice fractured. Tears welled up, hot and salty. He cried silently, his sobs lodged painfully in his chest. This was Leo without an audience. This was the cost of his daytime optimism. He felt himself free-falling into a bottomless pit where hope was a luxury joke for the rich. He was a typical American man left behind, working hard, paying taxes, but one slip-up cost him everything. He sat there for a long time, letting the darkness consume him. The urge to give up crept into his mind, sweet and tempting. But then his tear-filled eyes inadvertently caught sight of the refrigerator door. Underneath a pizza-shaped magnet was a crudely drawn crayon picture. It depicted two stick figures holding hands. The larger one wore a red cape drawn with smeared red crayon and rainbow-colored socks. The words underneath, written in wobbly child's handwriting, "My dad is Superman." Leo stared at the picture. Superman doesn't give up. Superman doesn't sit crying in the kitchen when the city needs him. And more importantly, Superman doesn't let his princess run out of medicine.
Leo wiped his face harshly, violently scrubbing away the tears. He took a deep, shuddering breath, his chest expanding painfully yet full of life. He stood up, walked to the sink, and turned on the cold water faucet. The frigid stream splashed onto his face, washing away the weakness, awakening every paralyzed nerve cell. He looked at his reflection in the dark window glass. Eyes swollen, beard unshaven, but the fire in his eyes had rekindled. "You can cry, Leo," he told himself, his voice hoarse but firm. "You can hurt, but you are not allowed to give up. Not tonight, never." He turned back to the table, turning on the small lamp. He took out an old newspaper, circling the sections for short-term manual labor jobs, loading, dishwashing, snow shoveling, anything that paid cash immediately. He would work himself to death if necessary, but Sophie would have her medicine tomorrow. While Leo was battling the demons of poverty, on the other side of the city, in the VIP suite of Northside Hospital, Elena Sterling woke up to the steady beeping of heart monitors. The room was as luxurious as a five-star hotel, filled with lilies and trite get-well cards from associates, but Elena felt empty. Her chest still throbbed faintly where her ribs had been forcefully pressed, a constant reminder that she had just returned from the brink of death. Bradford had visited her in the afternoon, bringing his false smile and a narrative about how the medical team had skillfully saved her. But Elena was no fool. She was a CEO because she could see through numbers and lies. She vaguely recalled a voice, a Bee Gees tune, and a pair of rough but steady hands, not the soft hands of a physician. "Nurse," Elena called, her voice weak but authoritative, "bring me my iPad and call Marcus, the head of security, immediately." 15 minutes later, the security camera footage from the conference room was sent to her device. Elena pressed play. She re-watched the moment she collapsed. She saw the cowardice of the board. She saw how they retreated. And then she saw Leo. He burst in like a whirlwind. She rewound the part where he tore her shirt to attach the defibrillator pads, the part where he performed compressions while yelling at Bradford. She couldn't hear the sound, but she read his lips and his body language. It was not aggression. It was the purest form of desperation and determination to save a life. And then, the conclusion. She saw Bradford pointing a finger at Leo. She saw Leo standing there, alone, wiping sweat,
then bowing his head in acceptance as he left. No resistance, no demanding of rights, just quietly gathering his things and disappearing to preserve his last shred of dignity.
Elena turned off the screen. Her hand was trembling with fury. The anger was not directed at Bradford, he would be dealt with later, but at herself and the system she represented. She had allowed the man who saved her life to be trampled and thrown out like garbage. "Miss Sterling, you need to rest. Your blood pressure is rising." The head nurse stepped in to caution. "Get me my clothes," Elena ordered, ripping the IV line from her arm, "and prepare the car." "But the doctor said—" "I don't care what the doctor said. I owe a life, and I don't make a habit of welching on debts." The next morning, Leo was out of the house by 4 a.m. after arranging for the kind neighbor to watch Sophie. He worked like a machine. From 5 a.m. to 9 a.m., he loaded frozen vegetable crates at the wholesale market. His back was agonizingly sore, each 50 kg crate pressed down on muscles not yet recovered from yesterday's CPR. From 10 a.m., he took a dishwashing job at Joe's Greasy Spoon, a diner on the edge of the neighborhood, where the floor was sticky with grease and the smell of burnt onions clung to every strand of hair. By 2 p.m., Leo was exhausted. He stood over the sink overflowing with soapy water, his hands wrinkled from prolonged submersion. But in his pocket, he had $45 cash, just $5 more. The diner door opened. The chime tinkled. A sleek black Bentley pulled up to the curb, conspicuously out of place among the rusty pickup trucks. A woman stepped out. She wore tailored trousers, a cream trench coat, and large sunglasses. Though her face was still slightly pale, her aura silenced the entire diner. Elena removed her glasses, scanning the room. She spotted him, not in a customer booth, but behind the counter, carrying a towering stack of dishes. Leo looked ragged. Dark circles under his eyes, his uniform stained with ketchup. He walked with a slight limp, likely from his aching back. Elena's heart clenched. Was this the man who saved her? But then, something happened that made her stop. At table number 4, a boy around 5 years old was wailing because he had dropped his ice cream cone on the floor. His mother, looking tired and irritated, was scolding him to be quiet.
Leo walked past. Instead of ignoring the noise or showing annoyance, he stopped. He put the stack of dishes down on a nearby table. Ignoring the pain in his back, he squatted down to the boy's eye level. He reached into his apron pocket, pulled out nothing. He clenched his fist, blew a little poof. "Hey, kid, do you know why ice cream falls on the floor?" Leo whispered, his radiant smile reappearing, momentarily masking his exhaustion. The boy stopped crying, looking at him curiously. "Because it wanted to kiss the floor. But I have a magic trick," Leo winked. He quickly snatched a peppermint candy from the register, which he had discreetly pocketed earlier, holding it up. "Transformation. Melted ice cream turns into the giant's peppermint jewel." The boy's eyes widened, then he giggled, taking the candy. "Shh, a secret just between us men," Leo winked, patting the boy's head before standing up, picking up the stack of dishes, and continuing his work. Elena was rooted to the spot. She had prepared herself to meet an angry, resentful, or broken Leo. She brought a check, a lawyer, and an apology to soothe her conscience. But she hadn't expected to witness this. She saw a man at the bottom rung of society, stripped of everything, yet still willing to stop and wipe the tears of a stranger's child. He was not just resilient, he was stubbornly kind. In that moment, the wall of ice around Elena Sterling's heart began to crack. She realized she hadn't just come here to repay a debt. She came because she wanted to understand this man. She wanted to know what created such a vibrant soul amidst the ashes of life. Elena took a deep breath, walking toward the dishwashing station, casting aside all class barriers. "Hey, Magic Man," she spoke, her voice no longer cold but trembling with suppressed emotion. "I heard you have very skillful life-saving hands. Would you mind saving me one more time?" Leo turned around. The plate in his hand nearly fell into the water basin. He blinked, looking at the most powerful woman in Chicago, standing amidst the grease and oil of the run-down diner, looking at him with eyes no one had ever given him, eyes of absolute reverence. "Boss?" Leo stammered, Then, instinctively, his crooked smile returned. Did you get lost, or are you here to check on the health inspection?" "No." Elena stepped closer, placing her slender hand on his soap-soaked wrist. "I came to find you, Leo."
The neon light of the diner flickered, but for Leo and Elena, the world seemed to have just burst back into light. Joe's greasy spoon seemed to hold its breath, the clatter of dishes, the sizzle of bacon on the grill, the noise of the working-class patrons, all receded into the background, leaving a pocket of silence around the cramped dishwashing station. Leo Mancini stood there, his hands still submerged in the basin of filthy, soapy water. He looked at Elena Sterling, the most powerful woman he knew, standing in the sticky floor, her expensive high heels unfazed by the layers of grease underfoot. Elena's hand, long and meticulously cared for, remained resting lightly on his wet wrist. The contact sent a jolt down Leo's spine, awakening the shame he had desperately tried to bury beneath layers of optimism. He snatched his hand back as if burned, hurriedly wiping it on his stained apron. In a deeply ingrained reflex, his facial muscles stretched, attempting to force out his signature smile, the smile of the invincible clown. "Well, boss," Leo chuckled, his voice slightly higher than usual, trying to maintain a flippant demeanor. "You came at a great time. Today's special is Soup of Hope. The main ingredients are dish soap and employee tears. Would you care for a bowl? Or are you here to reclaim the suit I cut up during the CPR? I swear I'll pay for it. It's just that—" "Stop it, Leo." Elena's voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp and final, like a decree from the boardroom. She didn't smile. Her gray-blue eyes bored into him, penetrating the layer of humor, piercing the strong defense he had built over the years. "You don't have to perform for me," Elena said, her voice softening, but the weight of every word increased tenfold. "I watched the security footage. I saw you fight death to reclaim my life when everyone else retreated, and I saw you walk out of the building with that cardboard box in your hand. I know you're hurting, Leo. I know you're bleeding inside." The smile on Leo's face extinguished. It didn't fade slowly. It shattered instantly, like a pane of glass struck by a hammer. He looked down at his hands, wrinkled from the water. The silence between them lingered, heavy and suffocating. For the first time, Leo lacked the strength to pick up the pieces of his mask. He was too tired. The back pain from the morning's lifting, the worry about Sophie's empty inhaler, the humiliation of being fired, it all converged at once. Leo sighed, his shoulders dropping, shedding the guise of the tireless Superman. He looked up at Elena, and this time there was only the raw vulnerability of a man pushed to his absolute limit. "You want the truth?" Leo said, his voice hoarse, devoid of any mockery. "The truth is, I'm drowning, Elena. I'm not a hero. I'm just a single father trying his best to keep the ship from sinking. I can fall, I can be trampled, I can wash dishes until my hands are raw, but I have to get up. For her, for Sophie." He paused, swallowing hard, fighting back the urge to break down. "That's not courage," he whispered. "That's fear. I'm afraid that if I stop, even for a second, everything will vanish." Elena looked at the man before her. She was used to men boasting about achievements, wealth, and power, but she had never seen a strength as immense as this, the power to admit vulnerability in order to protect what he loved. The icy heart of the Queen of Chicago resonated fiercely. She realized that the man standing in this puddle of dishwater was nobler than any executive sitting in the Sterling ivory tower. "That is courage, Leo." Elena stepped closer, ignoring the curious stares of the entire diner. "And you won't have to hold that ship up alone anymore." She took a white envelope from her coat pocket and placed it on the cold stainless steel counter. "What is this?" Leo asked, his eyes still red-rimmed. "Bradford was fired this morning. He will never set foot in Chicago finance again," Elena said calmly. "And this is your new contract." Leo took the envelope, his hand trembling as he opened it. He expected to be reinstated as a janitor, perhaps with a small raise, but the bold print at the top of the page stunned him.
Director of Employee Relations and Welfare? Salary $30,000 a month? I don't understand, Leo stammered, looking at Elena as if she had grown a second head. I don't have a college degree. I didn't even finish community college. All I know is how to clean floors and tell bad jokes. I have dozens of PhDs and MBAs in that building, Leo, and they were useless when human beings needed each other most, Elena asserted. I don't need someone who can read a balance sheet. I need someone who sees the invisible people. I need someone who knows the security guard's name, who knows the cleaning lady is worried about her kids, who knows how to bring hope when things are at their worst. You built a better corporate culture than I did, even while holding a mop. Imagine what you can do with power. Leo looked at the contract, then at Elena. This time, the smile returned to his lips. Not the performance smile, not the mask. It was a smile of relief, of dawn after a long, dark night.
Sophie will get her medicine? He asked the only question that mattered to him. She will have the best doctor in the city, Elena confirmed. Leo untied the greasy apron, tossing it into the laundry basket. He stepped out from behind the counter, standing opposite Elena. "Boss," he said, his eyes twinkling, "you just hired a guy who wears pineapple socks to your executive board. Your stock might drop." Elena smiled, a radiant, warm smile that the press had never captured. "I'm willing to bet on it." 6 months later, Sterling Towers had changed, not in architecture, but in soul. In the glass conference room where the near-fatal incident occurred, the atmosphere was now completely different. A meeting was in session, but there was no suffocating tension. Leo Mancini sat at the head of the table, beside Elena. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, looking sharp and professional. But when he crossed his legs, his trouser cuff rode up to reveal bright pink socks patterned with flying piglets. "All right, everyone," Leo said, his voice full of infectious enthusiasm. "We've settled the profit side. Now for the more important part, the emergency relief fund for contract employees. I don't want to hear reasons why we can't do it. I want to hear how we will do it." The executives nodded, pens scribbling furiously. They respected him, not because of his title, but because they knew who he was. He was the man who had been at the bottom and climbed up, bringing the heart of the building with him. After the meeting, when everyone had left, Elena lingered. She walked over to the window where Leo was standing, looking down at the sparkling lights of Chicago. "You did well," she said softly, standing close, shoulder to shoulder. "Thanks," Leo replied, his gaze gentle. "Sophie made the school play team today. She hasn't had an asthma attack in 2 months." Elena reached out and took his hand, the hand that was once rough from cleaning chemicals, now warm and steady. She didn't see the scars of the past as ugliness. She saw them as medals. "You know, Leo," Elena whispered, leaning her head on his shoulder, "people say the American dream is making $1 million and standing on top of the world. I used to believe that." Leo squeezed her hand gently, turning to look at the woman who had pulled him out of the mire and whom he had pulled back from death. "And now?" he asked. "Now I know they were wrong." Elena looked up, her eyes filled with deep affection and admiration. "The real American dream is the ability to be beaten down by life, to be burned to ashes, yet still stand up, dust yourself off, and continue to love. That's you." Leo smiled. His smile in the Chicago sunset was not dazzling like the sun, but gentle and enduring like a lighthouse. He leaned down and kissed her forehead lightly. "We are survivors, Elena," he whispered, "and survivors know how to appreciate the light." Outside the window, the city was still hurried, cold, and harsh. But inside this room, and in the hearts of 2 formerly wounded people, winter had truly ended.